Chapter 1. The Moon That Waited for a Voice. There is a moon that drifts in silence, far from the light of any sun. It turns slowly in the dark, cloaked in ash and silver mist, listening to a galaxy that has long since forgotten its name. It is not marked on most star maps. It does not speak. It does not shine. But once, long ago, it breathed. And in that breath, something sacred began. The moon waits, even now. Beneath its frozen surface are caves of glass and shadow, carved by winds older than memory. They call them the wells of the first sound. No one knows who first found them. Only that the first pilgrims came without maps, drawn by dreams they could not explain. Some walked for years. Others said they followed a song that only came at night in their sleep, echoing like a whisper from behind the stars. The pilgrims were quiet people. They spoke in gestures and songs, and carried nothing but water and hope. They came to kneel in silence, and when they left, they carried nothing with them, only the memory of a place that did not answer. For the moon had grown quiet. Its voice had faded, or perhaps it was only waiting for the right one to listen. Then came the child. No one knows where she came from. She did not arrive in a ship. She walked barefoot across the dust, her eyes half closed, humming as if she were remembering something from before she was born. The elders tried to stop her, afraid of what she might awaken, but the child walked past them without fear. She entered the great well of the moon and sang not a loud song, not even a melody, just a note, one clear, soft note, like the sound of a star exhaling, and the stone sang back, not with words, but with light pulses of faint silver that rippled through the walls, like breath returning to a sleeping body. The air grew warm. The silence cracked, and in that sacred stillness, the moon spoke its first word in 1,000 years. Not a word of language, but a word of feeling, sorrow, longing, hope. A word shaped by the force itself. They say the child stood there, still humming, as ancient glyphs awakened beneath her feet. Spirals of crystal lit the walls, casting long shadows that moved on their own. She was not afraid. She was not surprised. She simply listened. And as she listened, the moon told her everything. It told her of the first breath, when the force moved through dust and silence and gave shape to sound. It told her of the seers who once came here, before temples, before codes, and learned to speak with starlight instead of speech. It told her of a voice that was never born, yet always waiting to be heard. This voice, the moon whispered, did not come from the past. It came from the space between sleep and waking, between what was and what might yet be. A voice made of memory and wind, a voice that could shape stars if someone was brave enough to listen without needing to understand. The child did not try to write it down. She did not try to keep it. She simply sang with it. Not in harmony, but in recognition. A gentle response to something older than time. And as she sang, the glyphs dimmed again, fading back into stone. The light sank into the floor. The breath grew soft. The voice fell silent. But something had changed. The child emerged from the well with her eyes closed, smiling faintly, and walked into the darkness. She was never seen again. Some say she became the voice. Others say she carried it within her and sang it to the stars. Still others believe she was the voice all along, not a messenger, but the message. Today, the moon still waits. Pilgrims come less often now. Fewer stars remember its orbit. But once in a long while, when the sky is quiet, a traveler may land and step softly onto the ash. they will hear nothing. They will feel only wind. But if they are patient, if they listen not with ears but with breath, they may feel a presence, faint and distant, like a lullaby wrapped in snow. Some say the voice can still be heard, not in temples, not in holocrons, but in the space between heartbeats, in the hush before dawn, in the silence that follows sorrow, and when the galaxy grows loud with war and fear, when the force bends under the weight of prophecy and pain, there are those who turn their minds back to that moon, the moon that did not shine, that did not speak, that waited, and they remember the child, and the note, and the breath, and in that memory they rest, because some truths do not arrive with thunder, some voices are not born in battle, some songs live only in silence, and the moon that waited for a voice still listens. Chapter 2. When the first temple breathed there, is a world cradled in the fold of forgotten time. A world where the force once walked like wind through trees, and light bent gently around stone. Its name has been lost to sand and silence, but the old ones called it Tython, the navel of the stars, where breath first met meaning. It was here, long before the Jedi, before even the word Jedi, that the force stirred not in flesh, but in stone. There was no city, no monument, no boundary marked by blade or creed, just wind and dust, stars and silence, and then a breath, the kind that moves across an empty plain and changes the shape of everything it touches. From the sand, from the dust, from the sleeping hum of starlight under soil, a structure began to rise. Not built, not commanded, not shaped by hand. The first temple was breathed into being. It was not large, nor proud. Its shape was simple, curved like the inside of a seashell, woven from white stone and strands of light. But when it stood, the wind paused, the air shimmered, and the stillness fell so deep that even the force grew quiet to watch. The ones who came to it did not come seeking power. They came because they had dreamed of it, not its form, but its feeling. Each had stood beneath different stars. Each had walked different paths, but all dreamed of the same breath, the same rising hum, the same place waiting for them to arrive. They were not teachers, not yet. They were seekers, listeners. They brought no rules, no code, only questions, and for a time the temple answered. Its walls did not echo voices. They remembered them. A whisper spoken at dawn could return in moonlight, softened by the stone. Some said the temple shifted its rooms at night, so that each seeker would find only what they needed: a shadow, a pool, a flame. Others said the temple sang not in notes, but in feelings, like a dream too deep to name. For 100 years it breathed, and then, slowly, it sighed. No one knows when the wind began to change. It came quietly, like sorrow after laughter, like night following the last flicker of sun. The breath that had once filled the temple with light began to thin. The seekers grew restless. Some demanded answers. Others tried to give them. The questions were no longer sacred. They were sharp, heavy, divided, and the temple grew still. One by one, its walls faded. Light turned cold. The echoes became distant, like voices buried beneath years. The stone no longer sang. It only held its breath. And then, one day, it was gone, not destroyed, but buried. By time, by silence, by the weight of forgetting. Some say it sleeps beneath a hill where the wind no longer moves. Others say it sank into the bedrock of the world, hiding its memory from those who would twist it into doctrine. A few whispered that the temple left of its own will, choosing silence over misuse. But a story lingers, a single crystal, said to carry the last breath of the temple, still hums in the hands of those who know how to listen. It does not glow, it does not speak, it remembers, and when held beneath a certain moon, on a certain night, it warms, just slightly, as if stirred by a forgotten sigh. There are those who still search for the place where breath became structure. They carry no blades, no banners, just patience. And when they kneel in silence beneath the open sky, they say they can feel it, the faintest pull, like gravity made of memory, like something beneath the soil still dreaming. They do not try to uncover it, they do not dig. They simply wait, because the temple, they believe, is not lost, it is only resting. And when the wind returns, when the force breathes again through dust and dawn, it may rise once more, not in stone, not in light, but in the space between silence and song. For some structures are not made to be seen. Some temples live only in breath, and the breath, once given, never truly ends. Chapter 3: The Prophet Who Walked Without a Shadow. Ago, beneath twin suns that never blinked, there came a figure no one could explain. She walked across the sand with bare feet and closed eyes, her robes trailing behind her like morning mist. No one saw her arrive, no ship touched the sky, and yet there she stood, still and silent, casting no shadow. They watched her with quiet fear. The suns were high, but her outline left nothing behind, no blur of light, no reflection, just absence, as if the sand refused to remember her shape. The elders called her an echo, the children called her a ghost, but she was neither. She was something older, something the Force remembered, even if the world did not. She did not speak for 3 days. She sat beneath the singing stones of the dune halls, where the wind weaves between pillars and speaks in a voice like breath caught in crystal. She did not eat, she did not sleep. She simply listened, not with her ears, but with something deeper, something rooted in the place where prophecy is born. And then, softly, she began to speak, not of war, not of victory, but of threads, unseen lines, stretched across time, glimmering like silk in moonlight. She spoke of how they tangle, fray, and reweave, how some threads must break for others to shine. She described the Force not as current or code, but as weaving, a living tapestry of light and shadow, shaped by choice and silence alike. Some listened with awe, others with dread, for her words held no comfort, no promise of balance. She did not speak of light rising or darkness falling. She spoke of a final thread, one hidden, one frayed, one soaked in sorrow. She said it would come from the center of the storm, not to destroy, but to close the weave. They asked her, who? She said nothing. They asked her when. She only touched the sand, a spiral, a mirror, a question, and then she rose. She walked to the edge of the shifting mirror, a lake of sand so fine, it reflected like water under the right wind. Its surface shimmered beneath the suns, showing not what was above, but what might have been. It was said only the worthy could see clearly. Most saw only distortion, flickers of regret, hints of joy never lived. She stood at its center, her robes rippled, the air thickened, and in a blink she was gone. But her shadow remained, not on the ground, but within the sand, as if her absence had been carved into the memory of the world. A dark shape, motionless, endless. The wind could not move it. The suns could not erase it. It simply waited, echoing with a silence too deep to name. Pilgrims still come to that place. Some lie beside the shadow and press their ears to the ground. Others whisper her words, trying to understand the threads she saw. But the shadow offers no answer. It does not grow. It does not fade. It only exists. Like a riddle waiting for its question, the elders wrote her name in stone, though she never gave it. They called her the prophet without a shadow, but the oldest among them knew better. She had not come without a shadow. She had left it behind as a mark, a warning, a prophecy made of absence. And when the galaxy darkens, when the weave begins to tear, they say her shadow will shift, not disappear, not move. Just breathe, like the last whisper of someone who has seen the end, and still chooses to hope, because not all prophets bring light. Some bring a mirror, and in that mirror we see ourselves. Chapter 4. The ocean that could not forget there is a world where the sky never stops weeping, where oceans stretch farther than the eye can dream, and waves carry the weight of centuries in their silent rise and fall. Beneath the surface of this ancient sea lies a forgotten temple, not ruined, not broken, but sleeping. A cathedral of sorrow and memory, carved from coral and crystal, known only in whispers as the temple of the drowned word. Long ago, before the seas claimed its spires, this temple stood in the open air, singing with wind and prayer. Its walls were etched with vows, not spoken, but felt, like the hush before tears, or the breath that follows loss. It was built by those who believed the force was not only motion, not only light or shadow, but memory. And that memory, once given, never fades. Not truly. When the rains came, they did not fear. They welcomed the flood as a kind of baptism. One by one, the towers vanished beneath the waves. The priests did not run. They closed their eyes and sank with the walls, letting the sea remember them, and it did. The ocean wrapped the temple like a shroud, covering every word, every breath, every story etched in its walls. But it did not erase. It preserved, because this was not a world that forgets. It was a world that remembers everything. Divers who find the temple speak of strange visions, of voices underwater that do not echo, but enter the mind directly, soft and sorrowful, like lullabies sung by ghosts. They tell of glowing script along the stone corridors, visible only when you do not look directly, and always the same phrase repeated across countless halls. We are what the Force remembers. The deeper one goes, the clearer the voices become, not loud, never loud, but steady, like tide and breath. They speak of broken promises, of futures that never came, of love that vanished beneath duty. They speak of those who carried burdens too heavy for one lifetime, and of the ones who forgot they were ever loved by the stars. It is said that the sea here holds emotion like salt, that every grief ever offered to the temple still lingers, suspended in the water, not to haunt, but to be held, to be witnessed. Some pilgrims come not to listen, but to leave something behind, a name, a memory, a final goodbye. They descend with stones in their hands, etched with words that cannot be said aloud. They place them gently in the temple's inner sanctum, a vast dome with no ceiling, where light from above filters down like fallen stars. And when they rise again to the surface, they are changed, not healed, but lighter, because they know now nothing is lost. Not really, not in this place. The Force does not forget what we cannot carry. It remembers for us. There are tales of a figure who walks beneath the water without aid. A woman robed in kelp and moonlight, whose eyes reflect only the past. She is said to appear beside those who have wandered too deep into sorrow, guiding them back with a touch that feels like memory. Some say she was the last priestess. Others believe she is the temple, a living echo shaped by remembrance and grief. And then there is the glowing script. It moves even now, after millennia, beneath pressure and darkness. It continues to form. New lines, new names, new sorrows. As if the temple is still listening, still recording, even as the galaxy turns its gaze elsewhere. One diver, a young scholar of forgotten rituals, once claimed to see his own name written there, not in his language, but in feeling. He wept without knowing why. When he returned to the surface, he could no longer recall the path he had taken, but he carried with him a calm so deep it silenced his dreams. He never returned to the temple, but sometimes, when it rains, he says he hears the ocean speaking in his bones, and he listens. Because in that water, in that temple, in that endless silence, there lives a truth many fear to face. The Force does not move only forward. It looks back, it holds what we leave behind, and it remembers. Chapter 5. The sword buried in silence in a part of the galaxy where stars no longer burn. There is a world without sound, a dead world, a place where no wind stirs the dust, and nothing living dares to remain. It circles a collapsed sun, forgotten by all but the Force. The ancient ones called it Heritune, the place of hollow breath, and deep beneath its surface, hidden in the stone, there lies a blade, not a weapon of war, not a saber or a relic of conquest. This sword was forged for something else, for truth. Its edge has never drawn blood, its hilt has never known battle. It was made to answer a question that can only be asked in silence. No one remembers who made it. No record speaks of its creation. Some say the blade forged itself, formed from the breath of the Force in a time before names. Others believe it was the last act of a dying seer who poured her final vision into molten crystal, shaping it with her heartbeat. Whatever its origin, the sword remains untouched, unseen, and very much awake. It is buried in a chamber so quiet, the sound of one's own thoughts grows loud. Those who descend feel it immediately. The pressure of silence, pressing in from all sides. Not just the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. As if the world itself is holding its breath. The chamber is simple, circular, formed of stone older than stars. At its center, on a pillar of black glass, rests the sword. It does not shine, it does not glow, it simply waits, a narrow sliver of dust-colored metal, humming with something deeper than sound. Many have come for it. Warriors, prophets, collectors, all leave empty-handed. For when they reach to take the blade, it does not move. Not because it is bound by force or weight, but because it does not recognize them. The sword cannot be claimed. It must choose, and it chooses only those who remember the vow. Not a vow written in books or sealed in ritual, but one whispered in the heart before birth. A promise made in silence, known only to the Force. Most have forgotten theirs. Others never knew they made one, but the sword remembers, and it will not awaken until that vow is spoken again. Not with words, but with presence. There is a legend of a pilgrim who sat before the blade for 12 days, never speaking, never moving. On the 13th day, he stood and wept not, from pain, but from recognition. The sword did not rise for him, but the silence did, and when he left, he carried no weapon, only a deep and sacred stillness that followed him the rest of his days. Some believe the sword is alive, not in the way of beasts or machines, but in the way of mountains, rivers, and memory. A living truth, shaped not to cut flesh, but illusion. It does not serve the light. It does not serve the dark. It serves the space between the place where clarity lives and the force breathes without judgment. Those who have truly heard it speak of a single tone, just below the edge of hearing, a frequency that resonates in the bones like the memory of a sound you almost heard in a dream. They say the blade sings only once in a generation, and only to one who has stood at the edge of forgetting and stepped back. No one knows how long the sword has rested there, or how long it will continue to wait, but the chamber remains untouched by decay. Dust does not settle, time does not pass. It is as if the blade bends the world around it, preserving its silence. It does not wish to be found, it wishes to be understood, and that is why it remains buried, not beneath stone, but beneath noise, beneath the noise of fear, of ambition, of war, waiting for the one who will arrive, not with questions or commands, but with stillness, because the truth it holds cannot be spoken, it can only be known, and in knowing, the vow is remembered. And in remembering, the silence becomes song, and when that song is heard, truly heard, the sword will rise, not to strike, but to reveal. Chapter 6. The voice that wasn't her sin, the quiet stone halls of the early Jedi Order, before the temples, had names, and before the code was carved. There lived a young mystic named Elin. She did not speak often, and when she did, her words were like water, soft, flowing, difficult to grasp. She spent her days in solitude, meditating among the silver roots of trees, her fingers pressed to the earth, listening. She had always heard the Force as a murmur, gentle, distant, like breath beneath breath. But one evening, beneath a violet sky, she gasped and fell. Her body trembled, her eyes opened wide, and a voice rose from within her, a voice that was not her own. It spoke in an old tongue, a tongue no living Jedi remembered, and yet the trees bent toward her. The stones hummed in response. Elders came running, their hearts full of awe and unease, for they knew the look in her eyes, not madness, not fear, but possession. The mystic had become a vessel. The voice within her spoke of fire and of shadow cloaked in light. It named stars that no longer burned, and told of a path that walked itself. She would speak these things and then fall silent again, breathing slow, eyes distant, as if the voice had left her hollow for a time. The Order did not know what to do with her. Some believed it was the will of the Force, that she had been chosen to carry messages older than memory. Others feared she had been touched by something darker, something from beyond the veil that even the Force could not name. They questioned, gently, but the voice would not answer their questions. It only spoke when it chose, and always of things not yet come. Elon herself began to fade. She walked less, ate little, and when she did speak in her own voice, it was barely a whisper. "I don't know who I am," she once said. "I only know what she dreams." And so they began to call the voice the dreaming one. Some nights, Elin would wake screaming in tongues no one understood. Other nights, she would sit beside a candle, unmoving, whispering a single word over and over, a name or a place, or a feeling. The Order wrote these things down. They began to build a record, a prophecy born from her silence and storm. One vision spoke of a flame that sang like a child, another of a mirror with no reflection, where truth walked backwards, and always the feeling of being watched, not by darkness, but by something waiting just beyond time. Listening, one elder, Master Voya, dared to enter her trance with her, meditating beside her for 3 nights without sleep. When he returned, his hair had turned white, and he said only, "This, she is dreaming us, not the other way around." Elan's body remained alive, but her spirit flickered like a candle in the wind. At times, she would laugh at nothing, or cry at things unseen. Yet never did the voice leave her completely. It lived within, like breath. Within breath, a second presence curled beneath her skin. Was it the Force? Was it memory? Or was it something else? A being not of light or dark, but of echo. Some believed the voice was not speaking through her, but trying to become her, learning to wear a body, to feel time. To see Dot and Elon in her gentleness allowed it, not out of weakness, but from a deep, ancient kindness, the kind that listens even when afraid, in her final days. She walked into the Mirror Grove, a forest where the trees reflect not your image, but your soul. She stood beneath a crystal tree and touched its trunk. For the first time in many months, she spoke in her own voice. "I am not her cage," she said. "I am her doorway." And then she was gone, not fallen, not dead, just gone. Her robes remained, her staff lay where it fell. But of Elon there was no trace, only a sound, soft and low, like wind through hollow glass, that echoed through the grove for 9 days. The elders did not speak of it, but they returned each year on that day, and they listened sometimes. A voice would rise from the trees, not hers, not the dreaming one's, but something between, something becoming Dot. This day no Jedi claims to understand what truly happened. The scrolls speak of Elon as both mystic and mystery, vessel and veil. Some call her the first seer of the unseen thread, the one who dared to speak with something beyond the Force itself. But one truth remains. The voice that wasn't hers came seeking. More than a mouth, it came seeking being. And through Elon, it almost found it. Chapter 7. The sky that died twice there is a world whose name has been lost, but whose silence remains. A place where the sky died twice, once in fire and once in snow. Long ago, beneath twin moons that shimmered like pale eyes, a civilization looked upward, not with fear, but with reverence. They believed the sky was alive, that it listened, that each star was a breath, and every constellation a story etched by the Force itself, in temples made of glass and bone. They mapped the stars not with ink, but with song. Each line traced in melody, each alignment whispered at birth and at death. Their priests were stargazers, and their stargazers were poets. They believed the galaxy could be read like a scroll, if only one knew the right silence in which to listen. But then came the first fall. From the edge of the unknown, a red storm gathered. It moved not like wind, but like hunger. The stars above flickered, dimmed, and vanished. Then the fire came, not flame, but light so sharp it burned without heat. The sky opened like a wound. Comets fell like tears. Cities turned to ash. The people wept, but not for the dead. They wept for the sky, which had closed its eyes. Their maps became scars, and still they sang. In time, The fire faded. New stars rose, unfamiliar, distant. The survivors climbed their shattered towers and tried to read again. But the constellations no longer spoke. The melody was broken. The sky had changed its language, and so they adapted. A new temple was built, not to the stars, but to memory. Here they kept what they could, fragments of song, shards of glass inscribed with names, whispers passed from dream to dream. They trained children to remember not just what was, but how it felt. Generations passed. Then came the second fall. This time it was not fire, but snow. The sky, once wounded, now froze. A silence deeper than space fell across the land. The stars did not vanish, they simply stopped. No shimmer, no flicker, as if time had paused in the heavens. The snow fell for 1,000 days, slow, soft, relentless. The people began to forget, not from age, but from cold. Temples sank beneath white, songs faded into frost, and in their place only dreams remained, dreams of stars that once spoke, and a sky that had once felt alive. But not all was lost. Beneath the ice, in a chamber of mirrors and breath, a single child listened. She did not speak, not even to herself. She simply watched, and one night, as the sky held still, she reached toward it and blinked, and the stars blinked back. It was subtle, the faintest flicker, a shimmer not seen but sensed, like the memory of light rather than its presence. The priests called it illusion, coincidence, a trick of frost on ancient glass. But the child knew better. She had not seen the stars. She had remembered them, and in remembering, she had restored them. From that moment forward, others began to see it too, not in the sky above, but in the space behind their eyes, in dream, in trance, in breath. The constellations reappeared, not as they once were, but as they were felt. The sky, it seemed, had not died. It had gone within, and so a new kind of temple was built, not of stone or star-glass, but of silence. Here, seekers came not to map the heavens, but to close their eyes and remember them, to let the Force write the stars anew. Inside the space between thought and dream, they called this practice star-waking dot, and in time it spread. Elsewhere in the galaxy, in places where the stars had never gone out, mystics began to whisper unfamiliar names for constellations that did not exist in their skies, yet felt true. It was as though the memory of the lost world's sky had begun to echo across time to this day. Travelers sometimes find themselves gazing at familiar patterns only to sense something else, a shift, a shadow of meaning they cannot name. And they wonder if they are seeing the sky that died twice, flickering through them, asking to be remembered. For memory is its own kind of light, and even the coldest sky can burn again, if someone, somewhere, dares to feel it. So when you look to the stars, do not only look with your eyes, close them and listen. There are skies inside you yet to be reborn. Chapter 8, The Gate, that feared to open beneath a sun that never moved. In dunes that whispered of forgotten wars, there stood a gate carved from black obsidian, tall as a fortress, smooth as still water, and older than the name of the planet itself. It had no hinges, no handle, no sign of use or entry. It simply was a wall against the wind, a silence in the shape of a doorway. The people of the sands found it long ago, buried in the bones of a half-swallowed temple. At first, they thought it was a ruin, a relic, something left behind by an empire too ancient to remember. But as the wind swept away the centuries, and the stars circled above, they began to feel something else. The gate was not forgotten, it was waiting, and so they built a shrine, not to honor it, but to contain it. A circle of watchers, robes, the color of dusk, faces hidden beneath veils of silk. They called themselves the keepers of the threshold. Their task was simple, to guard the gate, but they did not guard from it, they guarded for it. Generations passed, and the keepers kept their vigil. They sang the old tones to still the sands, lit fires in spirals to echo the stars, and most importantly, they listened, for they believed the gate would speak before it opened, and it did. Speak not in voice, not in word, but in dream. One by one, the keepers began to feel it, a presence behind the stone, not dark, not light, something deeper, something true. It did not call out, yet it pressed forward, as if the gate itself yearned for release, but had forgotten how to ask. Some felt awe, some felt terror, all felt change. The oldest texts called it a door to shadow, a wound in the world, a place where the force twisted inward and truth became unbearable. Others believed it was a veil, not over darkness, but over understanding, that what lay beyond was not death, but clarity too great for waking minds to bear. And so the greatest question grew, was the gate sealed out of fear or mercy? One keeper, a woman with silver tattoos and silence in her eyes, dared to walk closest. She placed her palm against the stone, cold, smooth, unmoving, and yet inside her mind a tide began to rise. Images, fractures of memory, a forest burning backwards, a child made of stars, a voice that said only, not yet. She fell to her knees, not in pain, but in recognition. Something inside her had remembered the gate, as if it had once been part of her. From that day, she said nothing more. She simply kept watch, day and night, never blinking when the sun passed overhead, never sleeping when the dunes sang beneath the moon. Her presence became the shrine, not the gate, and still the gate remained closed. But the people began to change. Pilgrims arrived from distant systems, drawn not by legend, but by dream. Many claimed they had seen the gate in visions, long before they knew it was real. Always the same shape, always the same feeling, that something ancient, something aching, waited on the other side, not to be opened, but to be understood. A few tried to force it. They carved, they burned, they brought machines that shook the earth and lights that pierced the stone. None succeeded. The gate did not resist, it simply refused. For this was not a barrier to be broken, it was a question, and questions, when misunderstood, do not answer. So the keepers waited still, not for the gate to open, but for the one who would not want it to, the one who would arrive not in triumph, but in silence, who would kneel not in command, but in listening, for they believed the gate would not open to power, or need, or prophecy. It would open only to recognition, to the soul that remembered it not as a prize, but as a part of itself. And so the legend grew, that beyond the gate lies not a chamber or a weapon, but a mirror, one so ancient it reflects not the face, but the origin. Some fear what it may show, others dream of standing before it, and finally knowing who they were before the force gave them shape to this day. The gate remains sealed. It hums when the moons are aligned. It trembles when the wind carries certain names. And in the stillest hour of the night, the keepers say it sighs, not in longing, not in grief, but in patience, for the force does not hurry it. Waits, and in some forgotten corner of the galaxy, a child draws a door in the sand, and does not know why her hand trembles. Chapter 9. The one who dreamed the force in the twilight between stars, when the galaxy was still young and the force had only just begun to speak in dreams. There lived a being with no name, no tribe, number temple, no creed. He walked not as Jedi or Sith, nor as mystic or monk. He was simply present, as if born from the breath between thoughts, as if shaped by stillness itself. Some say he was the first to sleep in the Force, not in death, but in surrender, not to leave the world, but to listen to it more deeply than waking aloud. He wandered from world to world, unnoticed, untouched. He carried no blade, no robes, no scrolls, only his silence, only his breath. And wherever he passed, the air changed. The leaves turned to face him. The rivers slowed. The stones, humed. He found no home, for no place held him, and yet all places welcomed him, until one day, on the edge of a red and gold horizon, he came upon a cave made of memory. It was not carved, it had not formed by chance. It had been waiting, shaped by the force itself, hollowed by time, lined with echoes. There he lay down. He folded his limbs like roots folding into earth. He placed his head upon the stone like a child beneath starlight, and he closed his eyes not to rest, but to return. The breath slowed, the heart quieted, and the dream began. But this was no ordinary dream. This was the dream of one who had become transparent, like water, like wind, allowing the force to pour through without resistance, in sleep. His spirit drifted beyond planets and empires, beyond time and form. He walked in visions not his own. Suns bloomed and vanished. Species rose and vanished like tides. The force pulsed in waves, neither light nor dark, only motion, only song. He saw the twin roots of destiny twist and shimmer. One led to peace, one to fire. Both were real, both were necessary, both incomplete without the other. And in the center of it all, a child, small, unknown, yet bright enough to bend the dream. This child, he saw, would walk not between light and dark, but through them, a vessel shaped by suffering, chosen by contradiction. A child born from prophecy, yet bound to destroy it. One who would dream differently, not of order, not of chaos, but of balance. So true it would terrify the stars. The sleeper saw the child kneel before flame and not flinch. He saw the child lift a saber and not strike. He saw the child speak to ghosts and be forgiven. When he awoke decades, perhaps centuries later, his body had faded to near light. His skin shimmered like mist. His voice when he spoke was not his own. It was the voice of the force itself, softened by the memory of sleep. He said only this: the force has begun to dream itself, and the world grew quiet. Those who heard him wept. They did not understand why, but some part of them remembered. The being rose and walked once more, not to teach, not to rule, but to plant small signs in sacred places. A crystal buried beneath an unborn temple. A melody hummed into the soil of a desert moon. A single tear dropped into the pool where stars forget their names. Wherever he passed, the force stirred, not loudly, but like breath against ancient stone. Whispers began to spread, not of power, but of a presence. A soft voice in the dreams of seers, a shimmer in the corner of vision, a sense that something vast had begun to awaken within the Force. Not because of it. He did not return to the cave. He did not seek the child. He had become the seed of that child's arrival. And in time, that child would be born, would rise, would fall, would break the sky and remake the echo. But that was not this being's tale. His tale was not of battle or destiny. It was of surrender, of becoming quiet enough for the galaxy to speak. Some believe he became one with the Force, a permanent breath in its lungs. Others say he still wanders, not in body, but in the folds between vision and sleep. That if you close your eyes beneath certain stars, and the wind carries a note just so, you will hear him hum the first dream, a lullaby not of comfort, but of remembrance. And when it ends, a single thought will remain, that somewhere, long ago, the Force dreamed you to Chapter 10. The library beneath the river there is a forest where the rain sinks, where the trees grow not from soil, but from silence, and beneath their roots, hidden under a river of silver water, sleeps a temple, forgotten by time, and remembered only by whispers. It is not marked on any star map. It cannot be found by light. Only those who listen, truly listen, may find their way. They come not in search of power, but of memory. The temple is a library, though there are no shelves, no inked scrolls or glowing datapads. The walls are stone, smooth and warm. The ceiling is high, lost in shadow. The light here moves as if breathing, dimming and brightening like a heartbeat. The books in this place are not read, they are heard. Each one a vessel for a voice long gone, the echo of a seer, a thinker, a dreamer whose thoughts were too sacred to die. The voices sleep inside polished stones, resting in gentle pools. One must place their hands upon the water, wait, breathe, and only then, in silence, does a story begin to whisper itself directly into the soul. It is said that some voices speak in riddles, others in lullabies. Some weep, some laugh, some simply breathe, saying nothing, but in that breath is a truth no words could carry. Pilgrims come with questions, they always do. Who am I? What is coming? Why does the Force feel like a wound? But the library does not answer directly. It does not teach. It remembers, and in remembering, it invites the listener to remember too. One voice speaks of a time when the Jedi built from song, not stone, when lightsabers hummed in harmony with the planets that birthed them. Another voice recalls a darkness, not of rage, but of hunger, a cold so old it forgot even its own name. Another tells of a child who heard the Force before birth, and forgot it after. All these stories lie beneath the river, waiting for ears gentle enough to hear them. But one day the stillness was broken, not by footfall, not by flame, but by a book that began to speak on its own. Its voice rose not from touch, but from need, a soft, trembling murmur, a thread of prophecy unwinding in the water. The elders of the temple gathered, listening in silence, and what they heard chilled them. It was a tale not yet written, a vision of a future no one had dared speak aloud, of a flame that would walk in flesh, of a child who would be both the wound and the healing, of temples burning not from hate, but from love misunderstood, of a galaxy stretched so thin the Force itself would forget how to breathe. And yet, through it all, the voice did not weep. It sang gently, boldly, as if singing the stars back into memory. The voice said, "You are not broken, you are becoming." Some feared the prophecy, others bowed before it. One young seeker, a girl who had never spoken aloud, wept without sound. She said she saw the flame, and it smiled. After that day, the river shimmered differently. The light moved more slowly, and the stones grew warmer, as if waking. It was as though the library had shifted, no longer only a vault of what was, but now a whisper of what might be. Pilgrims who entered found that the voices they heard were different than before, personal, unwritten, alive. One man heard his mother's lullaby. Though she had died on a far world, another saw stars rearrange into the shape of a name he had never spoken. One child touched the water and heard their own voice speaking from decades into the future, whispering, "Forgive yourself." The Force, it seemed, had begun to write new stories, not from ink, not from thought, but from listening. The library had become a mirror made of memory, and those who entered it left lighter, not because they had answers, but because they had been heard to this day. The river flows, silver in moonlight, soft in song. The entrance to the temple is still there, hidden beneath the roots, beneath the hush, beneath the breath of trees too old to speak aloud. It does not call, it does not wait. It simply is. And for those who find it, for those who kneel by the water and place their hands in stillness, the voice begins, slowly, softly, softly, as if remembering them first, and when it ends, there is no conclusion, only silence. The kind of silence that feels like a hand resting on your shoulder. The kind of silence that knows your name. Chapter 11. When the stars forgot their names, there was once a war so vast, so endless, that even the stars forgot who they were. A war, not of armies, but of echoes of forgotten empires, screaming across the void, trying to remember their own meaning. It began not with fire, but with silence, a stillness so deep it broke the sky in ancient star charts. Constellations danced like stories, each shape a myth, each flicker a memory. They were passed down through generations, through temples and tears, used not just to travel, but to belong. But then they fractured. One by one, the lights above began to vanish, not extinguished, but scrambled, twisted, spun out of place like a dream interrupted. The maps no longer matched the heavens. Navigators wept. Priests tore their robes. Jedi reached into the Force and found only noise. And in that blind spinning galaxy, a child was born. Not of noble blood, not of prophecy, but of memory. He did not cry when he was born. He HUMM, ED softly, like a tune remembered before breath. The elders brought him into the hall of stars, a great chamber filled with mirrors and constellations carved in crystal. They hoped to show him what had been lost, but the child pointed upward and spoke names they had never taught him. That one is Mother's Eye. That one is the hidden door. That one hums like me. They tested him, took him from temple to temple, showed him broken charts, maps older than sand. He named every star, not with numbers, with feelings, with songs, with names. No tongue had spoken in thousands of years, and as he named them, the stars seemed to listen. They flickered, shifted, aligned one by one, like candles in the dark. The galaxy tilted gently, as if remembering how to breathe. Some called him a savior, others feared him. For what kind of child could remember stars that had never been mapped? What kind of soul sings to the sky, and the sky answers? He never claimed to be Jedi, never held a saber, never gave sermons or prophecies. He simply traveled, quietly, softly, to places where the maps had turned to dust. And he listened. He pressed his forehead to the stone. He hummed to the trees. He let the rain fall into his open palms. And then he whispered the stars back into place. There is a tale told by pilgrims who followed him to the Edge Nebula, a place so tangled in gravity, even the Force felt dizzy. They say he stood on a bridge of broken metal, looked into the swirl of chaos, and smiled. Then he sang a single note, long and low, like a flute carved from memory, and the stars stilled, not forever, but long enough to breathe, to rest when he left that place. The Force trembled, not in fear, but in awe, because this child was not creating. He was remembering, and in doing so, he reminded the galaxy of something it had long buried, that names are not given. They are felt, that stars are not just lights, they are witnesses, keepers of every vow, every loss, every beginning. They had not forgotten us. We had simply stopped listening. And so the child continued, growing older in body, but never in eyes. He walked from system to system, never staying long, always humming. And wherever he went, the stars glowed a little brighter. Some say he reached the place beyond maps, the deep beyond, where light bends and time dreams. And that there he found the first star, the one that sang all others into being. He did not speak of it when he returned, only smiled and looked at the night sky like it was home. Then, one day, he was gone, not lost, just absent, like a breath between songs. But those who had known him, even for a moment, found something had changed. When they looked up, they could see the stars again, not with eyes, but with remembrance. The old names returned, not in books, not in charts, but in hearts, and new names came too. Soft, sacred, shaped by love. Children named stars for those they missed. Elders named them for lessons learned. Some simply looked up and listened, because the stars still whisper. They always have, and somewhere in that vast quiet sea above, the child's song still hums, soft as a sigh, deep as the void, a melody made of memory, a lullaby to remind the galaxy. We are not lost, we have only forgotten how to name the light. Chapter 12. The Garden. Where darkness bloomed there is a moon that does not turn, a still moon, suspended like breath, half in shadow, half in starlight, where time feels stretched, and silence grows thick like moss. At its heart lies a garden, not green, not golden, but black, a garden where darkness blooms. The Jedi once whispered of it, not with fear, but reverence. They called it the dream root, a place where vision took root in the soil, and memory bloomed like petals. Only those seeking truth beyond themselves dared to walk its paths. No one tends it now. The Jedi are gone. Their temples faded into sand and vapor, but the garden remains. Its flowers are not like any others. They open only in dreams. Their petals drink silence, not sun. They do not feed on soil or water, but on thoughts, on secrets. The black flower, the one spoken of in shadows, grows in the center. It is not large, it does not shine, but it listens. Always those who have seen it say it moves when no one watches, that it leans towards sleeping minds, that its roots spread not beneath the earth, but through the currents of the Force itself. Drinking from what cannot be spoken, it is said that once, long ago, a pilgrim came, a lone traveler with no name and no past. He walked with a limp, spoke with a stammer, and wore a blindfold, not from blindness, but by choice. He said the Force showed too much, and he wished to feel, not see. He entered the garden on the third night of the moon's stillness. He did not light a torch. He did not carry a weapon, only a bowl of rainwater and a question. He walked the spiraled paths for days without speaking, each step echoing in the hush of the stones, until at last he found the flower. It was open, its black petals glistened like obsidian kissed by nightfall. He knelt, placed the bowl before it, and waited. For 3 days he did not move, not even to sleep. On the third night, the water in the bowl began to shimmer, then to darken, then to whisper, not in words, but in truths, memories not his own, names he had never heard, moments he had never lived, yet felt as if he had. A child born screaming beneath twin eclipses, a blade that hummed before it struck, a lie told to save a world, and the silence that followed. The flower spoke in visions, but it did not explain. It showed him what the Force remembers, but does not reveal. He screamed, but only on the inside. On the outside, he wept. He saw himself, not as he was, but as he might have been, and as he would never be. He saw the galaxy unfold, not in battle, but in longing, not in light or dark, but in shadow and bloom. He saw what the Force tries to forget, and when he rose, the bowl was empty, and so was he. He walked out of the garden, different, not changed, rewritten. His voice no longer stammered, but it trembled. He spoke in riddles, yet each one made the air colder. The Force has roots, he said, but it blooms in dreams. They asked him what he had seen. He said nothing. He never returned to the stars. He built no temple, gave no teaching. He became a windwalker, a wanderer of quiet places, and in his wake the flowers bloomed, black and soft, like sleep. Some say he gave his name to the flower. Others say he never had one, but now, when the Force swells with unease, when visions come to sharpen dreams too loud, the black flower appears, not always in soil, sometimes in rain on glass, sometimes in the shape of a shadow on the wall, sometimes in the breath before waking. It does not speak, but it listens, and those who dare to dream deeply, who surrender to the truth beneath the truth, say they've heard it whisper, "You are more than your memory. You are what the Force remembers when no one else does." The garden still waits, not to be found, but to be felt. It grows in places where silence is sacred, where dreams have roots, where darkness is not evil, but a teacher. And somewhere, in the stillness between stars, the black flower bends gently in the invisible wind, and listens for the next dream brave enough to bloom. Chapter 13. The temple that burned beneath the rain there is a world where the rain never stops. It falls like breath, slow and silver, gentle as a sigh. It has no thunder, no storm, only a hush that stretches across valleys and stone, as if the sky itself were mourning something too old to name. Here, hidden in the folds of forest and mist, once stood a temple, carved from petrified light, not built by hands, but formed over centuries by voices. Each stone sang with memory. Each wall was inscribed with prayers, not written, but whispered. This was a place of stillness, a sanctuary for the watchers of the flame, not fire as destruction, but fire as devotion. The monks who lived here kept no weapons. They wore no armor. Their robes were the color of ash, and their chants were older than stars. They believed fire was not to be feared, but listened to, that it spoke in crackle, an ember, not in violence, but in revelation. Each evening, as the rain fell soft upon the roofs, they lit a single flame in the temple's heart, and around it they sang, not to summon the force, but to remind it that it was still loved. And for many years, the flame answered, it danced, it pulsed, it glowed with warmth beyond heat, a fire that did not burn, a light that did not blind. But then came the night of fire and rain, no warning, no wind, only the slow sound of burning. It began in silence, as if the flame itself had shifted its breath, and then, without reason, the temple caught fire. Even the rain could not stop it. The fire did not spread like a blaze. It moved with purpose, like a question, seeking its answer. The monks did not run. They stood in the center of the hall as the walls lit with golden flame, and they began to chant, not in panic, not in sorrow, but in offering. They sang not for survival, but for understanding. They believed the fire had something to say, and they were right, because in the heat, visions came, not of the future, not of the past, but of what lies beneath both. One monk saw a mountain breathing with stars, another saw a child made of shadow and crystal, a third saw nothing, only silence made visible, shaped like a door that had never been opened. Their voices rose higher as the flames reached the ceiling. The petrified light cracked. The columns trembled, but still they sang. The rain poured harder, hissing as it met the heat, like the sky weeping into the fire's mouth. And then, with a sound like a bell struck in reverse, not heard, but felt, the fire vanished. All of it in a single breath. The temple stood, smoking and blackened, its walls scorched, but still upright. The monks were gone, no ashes, no bodies, only their robes, folded neatly beside the extinguished flame. And yet, in the days that followed, something strange began. The temple started to sing, not with voices, but with the echo of the fire itself. When the rain touched the stone, it made tones, melodies. The water carried the memory of their chant. And even now, if you stand within its hollowed walls as the rain falls, you can hear it, a song of surrender, of fire welcomed, not resisted, of transformation. Some say the monks became light. Others say they were taken by the force to places where voice becomes flame and flame becomes soul. But all who visit this place feel the same thing, a warmth that lingers not on the skin but in the spirit, as if something that once burned now watches and waits. Children born under constant rain have dreams of golden fire spiraling upward. Old travelers say the temple no longer holds prayers. It is one, a single, standing vow, that even fire, when heard, can be holy, and so it waits, beneath the endless veil of falling rain, a temple scorched by devotion, still singing, still burning, not in flame, but in memory. Chapter 14. The children who sang in fire. There was once a song so old, even the force paused to hear it. It rose not from temples or stars, but from the voices of children, quiet, bright, and burning. They lived on a forgotten world, where the sun kissed the mountains, and the wind carried heat like breath. Here, fire was not feared. It was raised like a sibling, honored like an elder, sung to like a friend. These children did not control the flame, they communed with it. Their voices wove harmonies that softened heat into music. With each note, the fire calmed. It curled like a cat, glowing with reverence. They sang not to destroy, but to soothe, not to command, but to understand. Their order had no name, only a vow. Let the fire be heard. They lived simply, cloaked in fabrics the color of ember and dusk. Their hands bore the marks of smoke and ash, not as punishment, but as proof of devotion, of listening. In the mornings, they lit small hearths and hummed to the flames as they danced. At dusk, they sat in circles around glowing coals, their voices rising and falling like breath on a sleeping world. The Force moved gently through them, not in battle, not in prophecy, but in presence. It was said their music could calm volcanoes, that once a star was stilled by their song, and that if you listened closely to any fire in the galaxy, any candle, any pyre, you might still hear their melody lingering deep within the crackle. But peace, even when ancient, is never permanent. One day, ships arrived, loud, cold, armored with steel and silence. A war had found the galaxy once again, and with it came the demand for weapons. The children were told to sing for battle, to ignite ships, to silence cities, to bring fire where the Force had not consented. But they refused. Not with anger, not with defiance. They simply sang the old songs of warmth, of healing, of listening. And so the order was marked for erasure. The invaders believed flame could be taken without its spirit, that power could be stripped from those who cherished it. They marched into the sanctuary beneath the fire-shaped cliffs, but found no resistance. Only children, humming softly, the oldest among them, a girl with ash-colored braids, stood at the center of the great hall. Around her, candles flickered with steady rhythm, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. She did not plead, she did not argue. She only sang a single note, low, long, and endless. And the fire listened. The great hearths glowed white, the walls trembled, not in fear, but in sorrow. And then the flames rose, not in rage, but in release. The hall caught fire, every stone blooming with light. But it was not destruction, it was departure. The children disappeared into flame, not screaming, not burning, singing. Their voices rose like birds, like incense, like the end of something too beautiful to remain. When the flames died, only silence remained. Ash drifted like snow through the ruins. The invaders left, not in victory, but in confusion. In awe, they did not speak of what they saw. They dared not, for in their sleep they heard humming, even across the stars, in the quiet of space. Fires would flicker in strange rhythm. Candles would waver to invisible tunes. And in the coldest corners of war, soldiers would swear they heard laughter in the flame. Not cruel, not mocking, just remembering. Remembering the children who refused to turn fire into a weapon and chose instead to vanish into it. Now, scattered across the galaxy, there are legends of hearths that sing, of ashes that hum, of dreams where children dance through ember and shadow, offering songs to the dying light. Some say they live still, not in form, but in flame. That every fire which flickers without cause is one of their voices, reaching across time. That when we listen, truly listen, to the warmth before us, we are not alone. And so, even now, pilgrims come. They light fires on distant worlds. They sit in stillness. They wait, and sometimes, in that silence, the flame sings back, not in words, but in memory. And in that moment, they understand the vow was never broken. The children still sing in every fire that chooses not to burn. Chapter 15. The Mirror. That refused reflection. It was not made of glass. It was shaped from stillness itself. High in the clouds of a forgotten mountain world, there rested a pool, wide, dark, unbroken, a sacred basin carved into the stone by hands long vanished. It was called a mirror, though it bore no shimmer. No face could find itself there. Once it had shown truth. Jedi seekers, dreamwalkers, and silent monks had climbed for days to reach it, drawn by the promise that within its surface they would meet the deepest self. The mirror did not show flesh or face. It showed what the Force saw. The path ahead, the wound behind, the echo of one's own becoming. But then it stopped. One season, the waters turned thick as shadow, and reflection vanished. Seekers knelt before it in silence, gazing into nothing. They saw not themselves, but shapes, shifting, possible, strange. Visions of what might be, what might have been, or what should never come to pass. It became a place of mystery, of fear. Some turned away, saying the mirror had died. Others claimed it had awakened. The monks who tended the pool said nothing, only that it was no longer a mirror for the self, but for the dream, and still the pilgrims came. One such pilgrim was a young monk whose name had been given up long ago. He wore robes the color of storm clouds and carried no weapon, only questions. He had heard of the mirror from a whisper beneath the stars, a dream within a dream. He climbed the stone path. In silence, days blurring into the rhythm of breath. Rain fell, wind howled, but still he climbed. When he reached the summit, the sky was veiled in grey, and the basin stood still, black and waiting. He knelt, he looked, and he saw not himself. He saw a boy holding a blade too heavy for his hand. He saw a warrior cloaked in red, standing on a bridge made of bones. He saw a healer whose touch could mend stars, yet wept alone. He saw himself as a tyrant, as a savior, as a child never born. The pool shifted. With every breath, a new possibility bloomed and vanished. Lives he had not lived, paths he had not taken, voices that spoke with his tongue but bore no memory of his choices. His mind splintered, not in pain but in awe. He was not one thing. He was a chorus, and for the first time he did not know which was true. Days passed, though he did not rise. He no longer slept, no longer ate. He simply watched, as version after version of himself danced across the dark water, some kind, some cruel, some quiet, some lost, and slowly he forgot who he had been. His thoughts drifted, scattered like leaves, not broken, just unmowed. The monks found him days later, still breathing, still gazing. When they asked what he had seen, he did not answer. He only whispered, "Which one am I?" They carried him down the mountain, gently, as one might carry a dream not yet fully formed. And after that day, the mirror changed again. Its visions became softer, less wild. The water calmed. Those who came after said the pool no longer showed possible futures, but fragments, a flicker of a face, a sound from a forgotten room, a hand reaching toward light. Not enough to know, just enough to wonder. The mirror had learned restraint, and in doing so, it taught it now. The path is less traveled. Few remain who seek their reflection in silence. But sometimes, on certain nights, the basin still stirs. The surface ripples with starlight, unseen, and those who kneel before it say they feel a presence, not above, not within, but beside them. A monk with storm-colored robes, watching, listening, wondering if he is the dreamer, or the dream. And in that stillness, something ancient is remembered, that the Force is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a song with endless verses, and the mirror never lied. It only asked the question, what else could you be? Chapter 16. The day the Force fell silent, there came a day when the galaxy forgot how to breathe. No one knew why. No sign, no tremor in the stars, no warning in the wind, just silence. The kind of silence that wraps around the soul, that presses into the bones, that feels less like stillness and more like absence. It began with a whisper, or rather, the absence of one, on the outer rim. A child of the Matakai order reached for the living flow she had touched every morning since birth, and found nothing, not pain, not shadow, not darkness, just quiet. Across the stars, a Jedi Knight meditating on a mountain rose from his stance, uncertain. He stretched his hand to the sky, expecting the familiar hum, that invisible thread, that sacred pull, and felt no reply. A Sith sorceress, deep in ritual on a blood-soaked moon, stopped mid-incantation. Her breath hitched, her eyes widened. The voice that usually howled behind her heart had vanished for one full day. And one day only, the Force was still. No visions came, no warnings, no whispers in dreams, or stirrings in stone. Just breath, just the sound of one's own pulse, echoing in the dark. Some believed it was the work of a weapon, some ancient relic that had stolen the Force away. Others said it was punishment, that the Force had grown weary of being pulled into war, into prophecy, into desperation, that it had simply turned away. But among the quiet orders, the keepers of calm, flame, and folded prayer, another thought bloomed, that the Force had not vanished. It had rested, as all living things must, and in that rest there was wisdom. Across the galaxy, strange things occurred. A Jedi whose sight depended on the Force opened her eyes and saw, for the first time, the world as it was, unfiltered, unglowing, real. A Sith Lord, robbed of power, wept alone on a shattered bridge, finally hearing the silence he had buried with screams. On a far moon, a child born during that silence did not cry, but stared upward, as if listening to something deeper than sound. Time did not stop, ships still flew, suns still rose, but those attuned to the Force felt the shift in their marrow. It was like being blind and deaf, but not numb, alive, but alone. Without the Force to guide them, many began to turn inward, to remember what it was to move, not by feeling, but by faith, to reach for one another, not through energy or sight, but through voice, through touch. For one day, the galaxy returned to itself, like a breath held and finally released. When the Force returned, and it did, with no warning, it came not as a blast, or thunderclap, but as a sigh, soft, gentle, intimate. Some heard it in the wind, others in the rustle of leaves or the laughter of children, and some simply knew, without sound or proof, the connection was back, the hum restored, and yet something had changed. Those who lived through that day did not speak of it lightly. They carried the silence with them, like a secret name. A few orders began marking it on their calendars, not with celebration, but with stillness. Temples were closed, lights dimmed. Only silence was kept. A day without visions, a day without prophecy, a day to remember that the Force, too, is alive, and even the living must sleep. Some say that in that silence something else was born, a seed, a thought, a thought, a thought, a thought, new way of listening, not to power, not to command, but to quiet. to what lies beneath the roar of stars and the pull of destiny, to the breath between breaths. Even now, there are Force users who train for that silence, not to fear it, but to enter it willingly. They walk among forests and frozen lakes, seeking the stillness beneath all things, not as warriors, not as prophets, but as listeners, whisperers of the pause. They say the Force speaks not only in motion, but in its absence. That silence is not a void, it is a mirror, and when all else falls away, what remains is not power, but presence. So when the Force fell silent, the galaxy did not break. It listened, and in that listening, it remembered. The Force does not belong to anyone. It is not a tool, it is not a voice, it is a breath, a rhythm, a living mystery, and on that one sacred day, it chose to be still, not to punish, not to vanish, but to rest so that all things could remember. Even light must close its eyes, even the stars must sleep, even the Force must dream. Chapter 17. The light that broke from within there is a mountain beyond the rim, older than maps, older than names. It does not whisper, it does not call, but it waits, not in silence. In stillness, its shape is sharp, but its presence is soft, like something holding its breath beneath the sky. Those who approach it feel it before they see it, shimmer in the bones, a gentle hum beneath the heart. For this mountain is not made of stone, but crystal, layer upon layer of radiant mineral, grown not from magma, but from memory. Some say it is the fossil of a vanished star. Others call it a wound in the galaxy that healed itself with light. But the mystics, the ones who dream beyond language, they call it something else. A heart not of a world, of the Force itself. Long ago, before the wars, before the temples and codes, before even the first names of Jedi or Sith were spoken, someone climbed this mountain, not a warrior, not a sage, just a being, wrapped in robes. Alone, not seeking power, but understanding. Their name is gone now, not lost, erased by choice. Some say they stepped beyond identity to reach something deeper, a presence that could only be touched. Without self, the climb took days. Each step closer to the summit felt like falling inward. The mountain pulsed, not with heat or wind, but with knowing. As the seeker rose, the air grew thinner, not hard to breathe, just thinner, like a dream slipping. Through the fingers, crystals jutted from the slope like frozen flame. They sang in silence. They gleamed with colors not found in any spectrum. Colors felt more than seen. At the peak there was no view, no sunrise, no stars, just light, a soft radiance all around and within. It was there the being sat and did nothing, no chant, no gesture, only breath, only stillness, for hours, for days, for a time beyond counting. And then something happened, not loud, not sudden, but complete. The light did not fall from the sky, it broke from within. From the center of the seeker, a glow began to bloom, not fire, not energy, but a knowing, a warmth that reached past skin, past thought, into the very threads of what they were. And then they disappeared. No scream, no explosion, just radiance. The crystals around the summit fractured, but did not fall. Each shard held an echo of that moment, a flicker of the light that was not consumed, only transformed. The being had not died. They had become something else, not matter, not spirita, resonance, an echo of presence, one that could still be felt in the silence between notes, in the shimmer between thoughts. Pilgrims come still. They climb in solitude. They sit among the broken crystals. Some hear a song, quiet, beneath the wind. Others feel a pulse in their chest that is not their own, but most feel only stillness, and that is enough. For this was not a miracle of power, it was a transformation of truth. Not light cast outward, but light turned inward. A letting go of shape, a surrender of name, a return to source. The mountain remains cracked, beautiful, and waiting. Some shards have been carried across the galaxy, used in sabers, worn in amulets, placed in temples. They shimmer only when held in silence, only when touched by those who seek not control, but communion. Each crystal hums with that same sacred echo, that to break is not to end, that to disappear is not to die, that within each of us, buried beneath noise and form, is a light not given, but remembered. A light that cannot be forced, only welcomed. It is said that when the galaxy falls into shadow again, not war, not chaos, but forgetting that light will return not from the stars, but from within those who listen, who soften, who surrender, and one day, one of them will climb that mountain again, not to awaken the force, but to remind it, we have not forgotten. The light still lives. It only needed to break, to become infinite. Chapter 18. The prophecy that wrote itself beneath the skin of an ancient world. Deeper than stone, deeper than flame, there is a chamber no foot has touched in 1,000 years. It lies beneath roots of forests long, turned to ash, roots of silence that dig deeper than memory. There is no door, no key, only a breath of wind that moves in a place where wind should not be. Within this buried place, a scroll rests on a pedestal of petrified bone, not placed, not hidden, simply there, as if it had always been. Its parchment is smooth, but no tool shaped it. Its ink is black, yet shimmers like starlight, and the words, they are still being written. No hand moves, no quill scratches, but with each breath of the world above, a line appears, a line of prophecy, not written by a seer, not spoken by the force, but born from it. Like a dream, the galaxy itself dares not speak aloud. The scroll writes itself only when no one watches. Priests once camped nearby, waiting for a glimpse of what might come. They took shifts in silence, never blinking, hoping to catch a word mid-formation. They saw nothing, but when they left, when the chamber emptied, new lines were always there. Some began to believe the scroll feared being seen. Others believed it was not fear, but love, that it wished to be known only in stillness, only by those who would not twist it into law or weapon. Each verse tells of things yet to be, but never in certainty. No dates, no names, only images. A flame with two faces, a storm that sings, a hand reaching through time. Each reader sees something different. One sees hope, one sees ruin, and one, always one, kneels and weeps. For the scroll does not give answers, it gives memory of what has not happened yet, as if the future is not ahead, but behind a veil, waiting to be remembered. Long ago, a young mystic entered the chamber alone. She was not trained, not chosen, just called. She sat with the scroll for 3 days. She never touched it, never spoke. When she returned, her hair had turned white. Her voice had become a whisper. She carried no writing, but spoke a single phrase again and again. The force has begun to dream. Those around her did not understand. Some feared her, others followed her into the hills, believing she now carried the prophecy in her skin. But she never explained. She vanished before the next moonrise. All that remained was her footprint, still, warm upon the stone. In time, the chamber was sealed again, not by force, but by reverence. A garden grew above it, silent, silver-leaved, blooming only at dusk. Some pilgrims walk its paths today. They do not seek the scroll. They simply sit beneath branches that whisper with wind. From nowhere, some say the leaves hum in languages forgotten. Others say they hum in dreams. For the scroll still writes, not for power, not for glory, but for the moment when one not great, not chosen will read it and understand, not with the mind, but with the breath. And in that moment, something will awaken, not a weapon, not a war, but a remembering of what the force is beneath all things, not order, not balance, but a question, a yearning, a song waiting for a voice. It is said that the last line of the scroll will write itself, the day the galaxy listens without needing to answer. And when that line appears, the scroll will stop, not because the future has ended, but because it has been found within a single being who understands the truth that no master ever taught. That prophecy is not a map, it is a mirror, and in it we do not see what will be. We see what waits within us, patient, sacred, and eternal. The scroll still waits, the garden still listens, and beneath the soil of a forgotten world, the force still dreams itself into story.